if you look carefully at this chart, you can see the light blue areas. Light blue is shallow. It's under 20 feet. Any of the light blue areas on this chart represent prime habitat for many, many fisheries species. In fact, estuaries like Narragansett Bay are the most productive nurseries for fish anywhere in the world. They occur in estuaries because you have so much biological activity in the shallow portions of the bay. So fish depend on these areas to be clean, meaning oxygenated, lots of healthy biological action going on. And Mount Hope Bay happens to be one of the prime habitats for one important species, particular species called winter flounder, which at one point was one of the most valuable commercial fisheries in New England. 20 years ago, I was told not long ago by a guy who was a biologist at DEM who spent much of his career studying fish populations in Mount Hope Bay. 20 years ago, this Mount Hope Bay was an extremely productive winter flounder fishery. It had lots of fish, a lot of jobs, a lot of fishermen out there all winter long. These boats tended to fish in the winter. The population of winter flounder, and as with many other species in the North Atlantic fishery, has collapsed. And it's collapsed in large part because of overfishing, not necessarily because of environmental impacts. Winter flounder fishing in Narragansett Bay has been banned since the late 80s. And we hope that that population will recover. Unfortunately, the project includes dredging of 73 acres that will be permanently removed as potential habitat. Permanently removed because the bottom will go from 20 or 15 feet, which is prime habitat, to over 45 feet in depth. Winter flounder can't spawn in 45 feet of depth. They need sunlight. They need that shallow water where all that biological activity is taking place. The dredging of the channel here, the total dredging project is over 3 million cubic yards of dredge material that will be removed from Narragansett Bay. And the dredging process itself will create pollution. A lot of sediment will be stirred up. Once the project is done and completed and the dredge spoils removed, by the way, they're going to be dumped in Rhode Island Sound off the coast of Block Island in an existing approved existing dumping site. The operation, we think the operation of the terminal will also likely have environmental impacts. The channel is very narrow. You'll have prop wash from tugboats moving these giant ships. By the way, I didn't mention this. The ships are almost 1,000 feet long, 935 to 965 feet long. They are 185 feet wide. They're just about as big as anything you can imagine coming up the bay. They're very big. And to move them, you need tugboats. So the ship will be moved up by tug into the turning basin, turn around, and the channel is pretty narrow. We think there'll be a lot of sediment stirred up. We don't know for a fact that'll happen. We worry about that. We think that could be an impact. And it's not just winter flounder. There are a lot of other species of fish that are impacted up here. I want to also point out something else that is not widely appreciated. Save the Bay and other organizations have fought for 20 years to clean up Mount Hope Bay. And the two sources of pollution in Mount Hope Bay, the two principal sources of pollution, were the city of Fall River, which has invested over $50 million to clean up their wastewater and stormwater pollution problem in the city. They've devoted significant resources, and the city deserves tremendous credit for biting the bullet in investing in the sewage treatment plant to take stormwater off the streets and prevent raw sewage from flooding into the bay. We think the implementation of this sewage control system will dramatically improve water quality in Mount Hope Bay. The second thing is, many of you know when you drive over the Braga Bridge, which is right here, there's a huge power plant. Can't miss it. Brayton Point is it's called. Now Brayton Point, since it was built in the late 70s, uses salt water to cool its turbines. They have 6 power generating plants at this big facility. It's the largest in New England, I'm told, largest coal-fired power plant in New England. They draw in 1 million gallons of Mount Hope Bay salt water every hour. 1 million gallons an hour. That water comes in, cools the turbines, and then is flushed back out into Narragansett Bay, into Mount Hope Bay. Hot water. So there are two big problems with this. The first is that as you suck in all this water, you entrain, it's been quantified, 1 trillion fish eggs and small critters and living organisms, but a lot of it is fish spat and fish eggs, gets sucked in and cooked, killed. And then you have the effect of the hot water being pushed out into the bay, warming the level of temperatures up in the bay here. And that, what's interesting here is that Save the Bay, with a number of other environmental organizations, pushed the U.S. EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, to withhold a permit for the operation of this plant until the company agreed to eliminate its once-through system and create a closed-cycle cooling system. That litigate went to the courts. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in April of last year that it was appropriate that EPA deny a permit under the Clean Water Act to the company. The company, actually prior to the federal Supreme Court decision, agreed to build cooling towers that are located right on the property, right here, to build cooling towers to eliminate the need to draw in all this salt water from Narragansett Bay. So the owner of the company, Dominion Energy, is investing over $500 million to create cooling towers to prevent this thermal pollution. It's interesting, by the way, the reason this case went to the Supreme Court, this is the first instance in the country that a power plant was denied a permit under the Clean Water Act because of thermal pollution. It's the first time it's ever happened where you can't pollute with hot water. Hot water is a pollutant if all the local native species die off when you pump it into the bay. So one of the things that we think is so egregious about this project is Fall River and Dominion Energy have both recognized the need to clean up the bay. They are both committed to investing, in the case of Dominion, over $500 million to clean up their pollutant effect on the bay. And at that very moment when these towers are built and the flounder population, plus all the other species, summer flounder, tautog, bass, herring and shad and sturgeon, all these species which rely on this area as a habitat for spawning, have an opportunity to recover now. And at that very moment when the opportunity arises, the company is going to dredge a huge swath of important habitat.